This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and picking topics that I don't actually want to talk about. My resistance to predictions and our efforts to overcome them. I am Hannah Keyser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. I'm going to do the thing that's bad for a visual medium and ask you to tell us about your new sweatshirt.
Well, my sweatshirt says oysters on it. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that. Went to Portland, Maine for Memorial Day weekend. Was a good time. I'm not bandwagoning oysters because I have been a lifelong fan of oysters, really. So can't say I'm bandwagoning them. But yes, went to Maine.
Would you bandwagon Maine as a place?
Sure, I would bandwagon.
Okay.
I will say, I saw Portland, Maine, which if you may have heard of Portland as the biggest city in Maine, but let me tell you, Maine is huge. We drove for like an hour into Maine from Massachusetts, but you could drive for like 4 or 5 more hours and still be in Maine.
I texted you yesterday morning about podcast things, and then I was like, let's text again in the evening. And you didn't text me in the evening, and I was a little bit concerned. And then I was like, I guess I have no idea how long this drive is. I'm just going to
It takes a long time to drive from Maine back to New York, which is what I did. I went to sleep.
On this episode, we're going to talk about like people say Memorial Day, that's when everything becomes real in baseball. So we're gonna dive into that phenomenon. I don't know. I'm gonna talk about manager challenges in a way that I did not see coming for myself. But first, we have some things we wanted to banter about. Oh, and you have a game for us that has to do with the fact that players are getting healthy, which is a very positive conceit for a game. Okay. Now to the banter. So every week I think, what is topical in baseball this week? And then I think, it's Tampa Bay Rays. And I say to myself, we should not continue to talk about the Tampa Bay Rays. I played that card way too early in this podcast.
Keep thinking that you're going to talk yourself out of talking about the Rays, and I'll be like, good. But then you don't. You just always end up talking about the Rays anyway.
Well, okay. So I did not go away for Memorial Day weekend. I stayed here because Brooklyn is a lovely place to spend a long weekend, and we had great weather. And on Sunday, I was like, what should I do with my beautiful, lovely day in Brooklyn? And I was like, I'm going to go to the park and read. So I took a little blanket and a book, and I went to the park. I live very close to the park, and I sat down and I thought, let me just check what baseball's on, because it was like the morning. It was the morning. And I was like, well, let me just see how long I want to read in the park, if there's anything I want to watch later today. I opened my little MLB.com app, and I was like, Rays are playing morning baseball because they were the Peacock game, and it was the Rays versus the Dodgers. And I texted you about this incessantly, so you know what's coming. But they were playing a truly bonkers game. And I was like, okay, it was the spoiler. They won 11-10. I don't even remember what the score was when I checked, but I was like, wow, this is a lot that's happening in this game. Before I get to my book, I am just going to pop in my headphones and take a little listen to the radio broadcast, see what's happening. And then I ended up doing that and not reading my book at all, because it was a truly fascinating game, as will be the case when the Rays, the best team in baseball, and the Dodgers, historically a pretty good team, scored 21 runs between them. So a lot was happening. But what stood out to me the most, and as someone who has consumed more Rays baseball than probably anyone not on the Rays or covering the Rays this year, I have noticed that not only do they steal a lot of bases, that's something you could notice just by looking at the standings. They've stolen 78 bases as a team. The next highest is the Pirates at 58, I think. So not only have they stolen the most bases, those numbers don't sound right to me. I definitely screwed something up in there. But they've stolen like 70-some bases, I promise. Is that they seem to be just running constantly. Like, in this, particularly against the Dodgers, who are really bad at holding runners on, that was something sort of coming into this weekend. Everybody was like, whoa, the Rays are running a lot and the Dodgers don't hold anybody on, so they're probably going to steal a lot of bases. And they were stealing, like, Josh Lowe would walk, and then on the next pitch he'd steal second, and on the pitch after that he'd steal third. And it was really, what stood out to me about it, sorry, it's taking a really long time to get to, was, do you remember in 2019, you and I went to an Atlantic League game?
We did.
And what was our takeaway to see the new rules? This was back when they were like first testing all of these various new rules. What was our takeaway, Zach, from that Atlantic League game?
Well, so the Atlantic League, they were testing a bunch of rules that included limiting. They limited pickoffs even further than the way MLB has limited pickoffs this year. And our take was that the catchers had no chance. That the pitchers and catchers had no chance of keeping runners from stealing, and it kind of became a farce.
So it wasn't so much a farce. Also, sorry, the update is they've stolen 73 bases as a team. The next highest is the Pirates at 58.
So it was close. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a big difference. It wasn't so much that it was like, oh my gosh, this is like a total farce. They have to change the rules. It was more that I was really struck by the fact that like, oh, right. If the success rate on stolen bases is higher this year, which it is, and the Braves are stealing at like a truly incredible success rate. They're at 80%, which is above average. The average this year is 75. Last year, they're below average at 71%. But like that you should be just running all the time. My takeaway was like, oh yeah, you should like, they are making a case for the fact that if you can steal bases at an 80% success rate, then I'm surprised there aren't even more stolen bases. Like it felt in some ways like that Atlantic League game in the sense that I was like, oh yeah, like why not? If you could steal second, why not also steal third? And if like you could steal in the third inning, why not also steal in the eighth inning? And that is reflected by sort of their strategy. I was reading a story in the Tampa Bay Times by John Romano about this, where Taylor Walls said, there you go. He says it more succinctly than I do. We're at a point where we're looking to steal on every single pitch. And that's how it feels watching the Rays play. It feels like it's not like maybe you have one guy who's really fast and the situation calls for a steal. It really feels like they might steal on any pitch. And I am very curious to see whether the adaptation comes from teams like the Dodgers, who sort of entered this season, I think pretty explicitly being like, we're not going to change our approach to the running game, both from an offensive and defensive perspective, all that much in response to these new rules. I think Dave Roberts said something that was like, it's about the personnel you have. We don't have big base stealers. We're not that concerned about base stealing. My curiosity is whether those teams will be forced to change their approach or whether the rest of the league will see what the Rays are doing successfully and be like, oh, we should be stealing so much more given these rule changes. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I don't think it will be that big of a change because 80% is actually not that big a change. 75% has been the league average. Like that's the threshold. It's been the league average success rate for a while, and 80 is not that big a jump. If it were 85%, something like that, yeah, you might see a huge influx. But the reason the Dodgers don't steal and the Rays do is very simple. The Dodgers are old, the Rays are not. Right. It is the young teams will continue running, and the tendency, just if we're speaking broadly, is it's rarer to have a huge collection of young guys who are all good, which is exactly what the Rays have, to be clear. But that's rare. Most good teams are actually kind of old because they have figured out, they have veterans, they've figured out who the good players are and acquired them. And the older you get, the less you're going to steal generally, So I don't think we're going to see the Dodgers like decide that the margins are on their side and they're going to steal a whole bunch because ultimately like Mookie Betts' thumb tendons and Freddie Freeman's hamstrings and Max Muncy is not going to steal bases. Like this is not where the Dodgers are going to go with it. I think there's a point to be made that like some of the surprise teams, the Rays are surprising in just exactly how good they are. And the Pirates had been better than we expected. The Diamondbacks are running and have been better than we expected. And because they are young.
And Baltimore,
Baltimore. There's something to be said for maybe this favors some young teams who have fresher legs and are willing to take advantage of this. But I don't think we're going to see a sea change of everyone deciding that the margin went up by a tiny bit, so we're going to run a lot more.
I do think we are going to see, well, maybe not then. I think I'm surprised that there hasn't been more change from a stolen base perspective, given these new rules, whether that's guys running a lot more because like the Rays, or this is what the other point I was making was like, why don't pitchers start picking off better? I mean, like, I know it's because it's hard, but I mean, like, I just mean like there's clearly an argument to be made that, to your point, some young teams that are having surprising success are doing it at least in part by how much they are running. And going into this season, the limited pickoff attempts felt like an underexplored aspect of how these rule changes might force teams to adapt. And it doesn't seem like we've necessarily seen, like I wrote a story in the offseason about how like the sort of game theory of the pickoff attempts and how some pitchers and pitching coaches were like, we're actually going to use this to our advantage. We're going to use that third pickoff attempt a lot in an effort to sort of catch guys assuming we won't pick off because we're out of pickoff attempts. And it doesn't seem like we've seen any of that. That's sort of my point, is that I'm surprised we haven't seen a more extreme manifestation of teams attempting to use this rule to their strategy, attempting to use the rule to their advantage, because the Rays, who are doing so successfully, are having such success on a grander scale. That's my point. It's just that like doing something with this rule, whether that is attempting to steal a lot more or attempting to be the team that throws over the third time every time just to see if you can get him. Like, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that.
I think a lot of this, I have praised the rules. I think they're good, and I think they have not changed the game that much. And I view that as sort of a positive thing, in that it's not the seismic change. It's some things that are good, but not seismic. And I think the reason we're not seeing the stolen bases change seismically is actually tied to that. Going from first to second, not that valuable. It just doesn't matter when there aren't that many singles and aren't that many doubles. Like, it's not that big of an advantage to gain, so you're just not gaining that much. The batting average league wide has only gone up from 243 to 248 this year. If there had been, if we jumped back to even 255, which actually was the league batting average in 2017, that's a more significant reason to go from first to second eagerly, but without any huge gap there, I don't think why would teams risk going from first to second for pretty much nothing? They're still probably going to score on a home run that doesn't matter which base you're on.
I wonder whether the league views that as the rules doing enough but not too much, or the rules not doing enough. That's a sort of a different point. I will say, I bet someone on the Dodgers offense was like pretty mad that their pitchers aren't good at picking people off, because they're like, we scored 10 runs and we lost. I feel like somewhere along the way, you guys should have maybe not let that guy steal. I think there's like 5 stolen bases by the Rays in that game or something. You wanted to talk about a different, more singular manifestation of the stolen base rate being a little higher, if not a lot higher.
Well, if you want to talk about someone who actually does have to run to score, that would be the A's. And specifically, Eduardo Ruiz, who was the main piece in the Sean Murphy trade this offseason, which was, I'll say, questionable at best. He is a very fast center fielder, though, and his thing is running. He stole more than 80 bases in the minors last year, and he is currently on pace for 78 steals this year, which I believe I did this in some sort of trivia form at some point to you. We have not seen someone go over, I think, 74 since the 1980s. It would really be something if Eduardo Ruiz gets past like Jose Reyes and Marquise Grissom had some low 70s steal seasons, but Eduardo Ruiz on the A's, they don't do anything, but he runs. So
I will have to correct you real quick. Jose Reyes, 2007, stole 78 bases.
Okay, 78. That's So that is currently what Eduardo Ruiz is on pace for. That would be a pretty big change to get anyone back into that realm. Obviously, we're probably going to talk more about Ronald Acuna Jr., who's on pace for, I think, 65 and is also an amazing player, which Eduardo Ruiz could get there, but I don't think he's ever going to have that power. He's mostly the legs, but that can be fun. So he's on pace for that. We're at Memorial Day. It's a time we check in on things. So that was, I think, something notable, just looking at the leaderboards of, okay, this guy is going to make an attempt to steal 70 plus bases.
Well, and because you're right, it is important when you're talking about stolen bases to consider like the success rate, because to your earlier point, which I understand, the success rate is the threshold around which it's like, how should you always try to steal or should you like not? And I think he's stealing at like a 90% success rate. So yeah, he should always try to steal. Again, also the A's don't have a ton else going for them. So has he stolen home? He probably hasn't. We would have heard about that.
I don't think he's stolen home.
He should try that. He should do that. What else? Truly, my guy, next time you're on first, just steal second, then steal third, then try to steal home. If you get thrown out, what's the worst that's going to happen? The A's are going to lose the game. And if you steal home, that will be fun for their fans and for them and for us, people who want to not write only negative things about the Oakland A's. I tweeted this last night. Do you know the A's are playing the longest games by average in baseball this year? This is more A's baseball than any other baseball. Please, Eduardo Ruiz, steal home.
When you have one of the worst pitching staffs in the history of baseball, you do give up a lot of runs, and it takes a while.
Takes a long time. A lot of pitching changes. They've used the most pitchers in baseball. So it's not action-packed minutes either. Except for when Eduardo Ruiz is on the base pass. Again, steal more. So what are you being conservative for if you are? There's no reason for that.
Speaking of action-packed, there is a possible actual superhero in the minor leagues right now named Elly De La Cruz. If you're familiar with O'Neal Cruz, the Pirates shortstop, think that, but like stretchier or something, skinnier, stretchier. He is a shortstop. He's 6'6", possibly a little taller now. He's young and maybe still growing. He has been promoted to AAA for the Reds, and over the weekend, he hit a home run in Syracuse, the Mets AAA team, off Joey Lucchesi, major league sometime pitcher. He hit it over the scoreboard. He is a complete terror of a prospect, and the fact that he's showing this level of skill at AAA now, he's rapidly approaching the major leagues. He is a switch-hitting, power-speed threat who, like I said, 6'6" shortstop. So if the Reds do call him up, they suddenly have a glut that C. Trent Rosecrans wrote about at The Athletic of middle infielders. They have former Rookie of the Year Jonathan India at second base, who's having a very good season. They have Matt McClain, an exciting prospect they called up like 3 weeks ago, who's playing shortstop every day. And then they would have De La Cruz, who is, probably the number one prospect in the minors in baseball right at this moment. And I would expect he's not going to be in the minors that much longer. So just want to flag that for, the Cincinnati Reds might be exciting in the near future. They're in third right now.
You mentioned that Steve Trent Rosenkrantz wrote about the potential glut in that story. Maybe actually not in that story, maybe in a different Elly De La Cruz story. He had a good quote from Reds people who have seen him call him, quote, a switch-hitting Fernando Tatis Jr. with upside. So that seems like kind of all you need to know. Fernando Tatis Jr. also been pretty good this year, despite the long layoff and everything. Other fun Elly De La Cruz facts. He hit 3 balls at 160 miles an hour or faster in one night at AAA, and no entire Major League Baseball team has done that in the StatCast era.
Liam Hendricks, the White Sox closer, made his return from cancer this weekend. I think everyone was very excited to see that. It's always kind of incredible when guys return to professional sports at all after battling cancer, and Hendricks came back in a matter of months, not years. So just great to see him back. It would be great if he can have meaningful contributions and either to the White Sox or possibly a playoff team this year. Great for him to get back to the White Sox, though. And, that's just an all around feel good story. I think you had thoughts on his return from an entertainment perspective.
First of all, it is lovely. He returned from stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I think in a matter of months. He announced that the diagnosis in January, I believe, and I did not assume we would see him this year. So this feels truly remarkable. If you want to read just every almost down to the minute, blow by blow of what has happened, Jeff Passan wrote a really thorough story. They focus a lot I thought this was lovely. Both the broadcast and Pat's story, but shout out to the broadcast for doing this. Talked a lot about like the toll it took on his wife and sort of her role in being there for him throughout all of this. That's not as fun as what I was going to mention, but I just wanted to give a shout out to that because I appreciate the broadcast. I appreciate that the broadcast recognized that his return to baseball is the end of the triumphant end of what was probably at times a very like difficult and untriumphant feeling journey for him and the people close to him. But in Pat's story, he mentioned that Liam Hendricks, by the way, loves Legos, and they feature heavily if you've ever spoken to him in the clubhouse because he's got them in his locker. I think he's got like a whole extra locker of Legos. And the White Sox bought him a Lamborghini Lego set. And there's a word in there that's doing a lot of work to really alter what that gift means. I was like, come on, you're a baseball team. You can buy him a Lamborghini. You bought him a Lamborghini Lego set. I bet he preferred the Lego set to an actual Lamborghini. He did a lot of Legos while he was recovering, including some Star Wars Legos. And yeah, that's all. I was a big Lego fan growing up. This is an embarrassing thing. I subscribed to Lego Magazine, which was a magazine. And this
is in addition to the pet lizard you had.
Yes. Oh yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Every fact about me from like before the age of like 18 is just deeply embarrassing. I had lizards. I was a big Star Wars fan. I subscribed to the Lego magazine. And beyond that, I once submitted something to the Lego magazine. Like you could submit your own designs. The
New Yorker caption contest, but for Legos.
Exactly. Okay. It's between the two. I think I would have rather been published in the New Yorker cartoon caption contest, but I have yet to submit anything there. Okay. Who else returned?
Mike Soroka came back. So
Michael Soroka.
Is he Michael Soroka now?
I believe that at some point in his rehab, he announced that he would like that change to be made. And to be fair, he should have to do that when people are paying attention to him because he's playing Major League Baseball, but we should honor it anyway. Okay.
Michael Soroka he's a Canadian Atlanta Braves pitcher. He was a really great young pitcher in 2018, 2019, and kind of a foundational piece, it seemed, of the Braves' rise to contention. As it turns out, they are excellent even when he is hurt, but he had an Achilles injury, which is obviously very bad and took him out for a year. And then while he was about to come back from that, he suffered another Achilles injury and he's missed just a lot of time. He last pitched in 2020 and is now finally made his return to the majors. He was pitching in AAA, kind of getting back up to speed, and the Braves have had quite a few rotation injuries. So they got to the point where they called him up this weekend, made his first start. Wasn't anything incredible, but it was a solid 6 innings. And that is just a triumph considering how long it took for him to rehab those Achilles injuries and get back.
Shocking to me fact is that he's only 25 still. So that's heartening because it's felt like forever since he's last pitched. And I just Googled to find out how old he was because I was kind of like, how depressing is this going to be? And not that depressing. 25. He's still got a long career ahead of him. Also, that game featured someone on the A's was also making their season debut. God, I should know this, but I don't. And I almost, but didn't, thought about watching that Oakland A's game just for the entertainment value of 2 pitchers who have yet to pitch with the pitch clock facing off against each other. I was like, what's that going to be like? End of May, 2 guys who have not yet experienced these new rules at the major league level. This is so good. We only talk about bad injury news, and now we're talking about some good injury news. Royce Lewis is back. Royce Lewis is like the position player Michael Soroka. He's a guy who it seemed like it was going to be great, and then he kept having the same kind of injury. It was the same sort of thing, which will sometimes happen to guys where right at the end of their rehab or right after they return, they get re-injured or something else gets re-injured. For Royce Lewis, he played actually a handful of games, I think last year before what was it? ACL?
He injured his ACL.
The ACL. And he was the 2019 1-1 pick. Yes, I'm getting that.
Mm-hmm. Number 1 overall pick, yeah.
Number 1 overall pick in 2019. He played 12 games last year. Finally made it to the majors after missing time to COVID. because there was no minor league season, and then also missing time to an injury that he sustained. He was pretty great in 12 games. He had an OPS plus of 143, and then he crashed into the wall, re-injured his ACL. Also at The Athletic, Dan Hayes has a great story about how much more difficult it was for him to rehab a second time. Again, these are the kind of things that like we don't see because guys are, it's like the longer you're out of the majors and the more you fade from public consciousness, that makes logical sense. But it's also then when you are reminded of it, you realize that like the longer they are away from the majors, also the more like emotionally trying that journey back probably is. So Dan Hayes had a good story about how like he sort of handled that first injury as like, okay, rehab. And then the second injury was like involved a lot of tears. And now he is finally back. He's played one game, batting 400 in that one game.
I mean, he was great in that game.
So the Twins, the Twins both could and could use that and also don't need it because they're in first place. So it seems like they don't need it. They're only like what 500, so they do need it. They do need it. They're 28 and 26 in first place. So good to get Royce Lewis back. Is Carlos Correa healthy? I gotta be honest, I didn't check this before we started potting.
I don't think he's super healthy right now. But
he's playing, but he's not healthy, right? That's, I believe, where we're at.
We will hopefully get to see Royce Lewis, Carlos Correa, and Byron Buxton all on the same team, all doing well. Those are a number 1 pick, a number 1 pick, and a number 2 pick. Correa and Buxton were the 1 and 2 pick in the same draft. So
and Alex Krylov, he's also good.
Yes, doesn't not a number 1 or 2 pick.
Doesn't fit with that theme, but no. I just mean like I mean more that the Twins have had a lot of very interesting, exciting potential position players. And the number one thing that holds the Twins back seemingly every year is like injuries. We're not going to talk about this, but I thought about talking about the fact that the Twins pitching staff has been just phenomenal this year. Maybe we'll talk about that in the future because it feels like it deserves more of a deep dive than I was prepared to give it right now. Because the Twins pitching staff was a real problem last year. Last year, it felt like if you went to a Twins game, you might get called upon to pitch. And now they have one of the best pitching staffs. Okay. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point.
So I have a game for you, and it's related. I have a game for you, and it is very related to this, to the Mike Soroka topic. I want to talk about the gap. Michael Soroka. I'm sorry, Michael Soroka. The gap between his starts in the major leagues.
Okay.
So there were 1,029 days between his last start in 2020 and his start this weekend to return to the majors. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a series of events, things that happened that lasted a certain amount of days. And you're going to tell me if that event lasted more days or fewer days than Mike Soroka's injury absence. Michael Soroka's injury absence.
Now I'm on his side. I was originally like, it's a little tough to ask people to make a change. And now I'm like, come on, it's not that tough. Okay. Just call him Soroka going forward.
Very familiar. Anyway, okay. So Soroka out 1,029 days. Got that in your head?
1,029 days. So that's our unit of measure.
Yeah. You're going to tell me for each question whether the thing is lasted longer or shorter than Soroka's injury absence. Okay.
Okay, I'm ready.
The major league career thus far of Jazz Chisholm.
Oh. I feel like he also debuted in 2020, right? Maybe? If I'm getting that wrong, I'm sorry. He's been injured a lot, but I assume that doesn't play into it.
Doesn't matter, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say shorter, but just by a bit.
Yes. So Jazz Chisholm debuted about a month after Soroka's last start. His is 1,001 days so far.
Ooh, all right.
A different type of major league absence here. Rick Ankiel's time between when he left the majors to convert to hitting. Between that, when the Yips ended his major league pitching career and he came back as a hitter, how many days between there?
Longer than Mike Soroka's.
Yes, that took him 1,042 days, so only about 2 weeks more than Soroka's absence.
All right, you're asking me questions like I didn't read the Rick Ankiel biography written by former coworker Tim Brown, but I did.
The JFK presidency.
Oh my God. Oh no. I was like feeling all smug about how well I know baseball. And now I'm going to feel very not smug about how not well I know American history. Shorter?
You think the JFK presidency was shorter?
Shorter?
It was longer by 8 days.
Okay, come on.
John F. Kennedy was president for 1,037 days. The construction of the Empire State Building.
Oh my God, I have no idea. Longer.
No, the construction of the Empire State Building only took 411 days.
What?
Which is wild to consider, especially that, it's still in use. It's a little scary, honestly. But apparently it's fine. Things were built better back in the 1930s.
The fact that it's still in use is not the surprising part of that to me. The fact that it's extremely tall. And also, I feel like I don't really know how construction works.
I don't know how construction works, but I know it would take longer than 411 days to build it now.
Would it? Well, that's because you can't get a contractor these days. We have scaffolding outside our building that they put the scaffolding up very quickly. And there's been no one working on that scaffolding for a very long time. Not that long, but for the entire time that the scaffolding has been there's been no one working on it. Okay. I was like, those are probably two separate groups. The scaffolding building people and then the people who use the scaffolding.
Here's one that, teenage you apparently might know the answer to. The time between the release dates of the first 2 Star Wars films. So episode 4 and episode 5. Longer or shorter than Mike Soroka's injury time.
To be clear, I was not alive when the original trilogy came out. In fact, I resisted my parents wanting to show it to me before it became my entire personality. I mean, I feel like it should have been shorter, but that makes me think that maybe the catch is that it was longer. Was it longer? It
was longer.
Okay.
1,093 days between the first 2 movies.
I'm sad for the people who had to wait that long because those are good movies. The third one's better, though. Return of the Jedi stand over here.
More fun to make an entire Star Wars movie than to just rebuild a tendon in your leg, though.
Yeah.
The time between Juan Soto signing with the Nationals as a 16-year-old and his major league debut.
Shorter.
No, it was longer.
Really?
Yes, by just a little bit. 1,054 days.
Ah, okay.
About 30 days longer.
It's so tricksy of you.
Uh-huh. The War of 1812.
Oh my God. Shorter.
Yes, it was much shorter than
really
Mike Soroka's injury rehab. It was only 974 days.
Of course.
So,
and other facts about the War of 1812 I definitely know.
Yes. Sticking with the war theme, but only sort of. Ted Williams' gap in baseball while he was serving in World War II.
Shorter.
No, it was longer.
What?
He missed 3 full seasons. So 1,298 days between his last game in 1942 and when he came back in 1946. And it was in his prime. If you look at his baseball reference page, it was like, oh, he was the best hitter in baseball when he left, and he was the best hitter in baseball immediately when he came back. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about Ted Williams.
Okay. I will.
Last question.
All right.
George Steinbrenner's lifetime ban from baseball in the 90s.
Oh, I have definitely read stories recently that reference it. And I also know that you've been reading stories about George Steinbrenner because you sent me a really good George Steinbrenner quote or a quote about George Steinbrenner or something. Shorter.
It was shorter. His lifetime ban ended up being 945 days. And Michael Soroka, for the sin of simply having Achilles, missed 1,029 days.
I feel like I did pretty well.
I think you did too.
All right. We are going to take a quick break and come back with the 40,000-foot view of the early part of the baseball season. Or, in other words, hoisted by my own petard. We are back. We are on the other side of Memorial Day weekend, a thing that people in baseball like to say is that before Memorial Day weekend, you shouldn't even look at the standings or the stats or whatever. None of it is real. And so I had the idea. I was like, what we should do is we should look at those things and decide which of them are real and which of them are, I don't know, not real. I mean, they're all real, but not going to hold.
Will it stay real?
Stay real?
Yes.
What I forgot was that I hate making predictions. And I specifically hate when people ask me to be like, this thing that has happened that is objectively interesting in its current real existence. Forget that. What's the future going to be like? And I'm like, no, come on, let's talk about the fact that it's already happened and it's interesting. Not everything needs to be predictive to be valuable. This is a very long aside for a segment that we did end up doing. We did end up doing it. So that's just my way of saying that and I think you are too, find these things to be interesting, regardless of whether or not we are correct or incorrect on our ability to predict if they will stay true.
Yes.
But in an effort to adhere to the conceit, we have each come armed with one thing that we think is real and thus will stay true for the remainder of the season, which is like 2/3 of the season. We're basically 1/3 of the way in. And one thing that we think will change. That is like a not short, it's not like a small sample size issue so much as it is like this has been the case thus far in baseball, and there is reason to believe that it will not hold up. We did not discuss off pod how we would go about ordering, structuring, whatever.
Go down the list. You can go first. You get the top of the inning.
No, but okay. And you don't want to take turns?
We can take turns. Sure.
We can take turns. Okay.
Yeah.
My first one, the fact that we are engaging with is that as a team, the Nationals have the lowest strikeout rate in baseball. I have been low-key monitoring this.
The hitters have
the hitters.
Yes.
This is the good version of this.
Yeah.
They are not striking out a lot. They also are not striking out a lot as pitchers. Unfortunately, that didn't clarify. Okay. They are good at not striking out when it comes to hitting. They are bad at not striking out other hitters, but that's not the part we're talking about. We're talking about the part that they're good at, which is when they are at the plate and the bat is in their hand and the other team is on the field and the other guys are in the dugout, they do not strike out a lot. Okay, I feel like we've made that clear. So I have been low-key monitoring this for a while because I noticed it like a few weeks back and I was like, interesting fact for a team that is otherwise not super great. Interestingly enough, some not great teams don't strike out a lot. This is the list of the 5 lowest strikeout rates. Again, the good kind, the badder kind in baseball. Toronto Blue Jays, they're good. So that's actually promising. That one made me be like, I feel like the Blue Jays are going to
They're
come
in
back.
Last. So, roughly the same as the Nationals. But
the Arizona Diamondbacks, the New York Mets, the Cleveland Guardians, and the Washington Nationals. So again, all teams that are not in first, at least. Some of them are like good teams, but I was surprised to see that it wasn't like the Rays, the Braves, the Dodgers, because teams that are successful often have people who can hit for power, and frequently hitting for power comes at the expense of regular contact. So what we are investigating is, do we think that the Nationals will have the lowest strikeout rate at the end of the year? Before I dive into what I sort of pulled as like potential evidence for one way or the other, what is your gut reaction? Do you think the Nationals will have the lowest strikeout rate at the end of the year?
No, I don't think they will. But I think that it's overall a good thing for the Nationals that they have a little bit of a strategy happening. Clearly, some of the guys that they traded for in their big deals, Keibert Ruiz being the big one, really excels at making contact.
Keibert Ruiz not striking out like at all. Congrats to him. As
he matures and gets more experience in the big leagues, he will probably figure out a way to do more with the whole not striking out thing. I think mostly the Nationals are kind of doing a version of what the Cleveland Guardians did last year, where they won a terrible division by being slappy contact hitters. It's not world beating. The Astros, when they were at their best and setting like offensive season records, they didn't strike out and they also hit for the most power. And that's the real method to success. But if you're going to have this is the classic Moneyball insight. Sometimes you can just get a lot of the thing that not everyone values. And overall, people value power more. Teams value power more than lack of strikeouts. So the Nationals have collected a bunch of guys who put the ball in play. And I think they will stay. This is a very sticky, this is a thing that you find out quickly about guys.
Right.
And so we probably do know that the Nationals have a lot of guys who actually don't strike out that much. I think as a team, they will probably mix in more players. So I think they'll fall somewhere in the top 5 of that, but not stay up top. Okay.
That was not as definitive as I was hoping you'd be, but same. So I agree. Again, quick shout out to Keibert Ruiz, who is only striking out 8% of the time. So that's working out. Again, he has a 72 WRC plus because he's not doing anything else particularly well either.
Yeah.
This is the evidence that I have gathered for whether or not I think. So I think Cleveland, which is currently the one right above the Nationals, so they strike out the second least. I think they seem likely to potentially sacrifice some contact for power at the deadline if that's available to them, because their slap happy approach is not working nearly as well this year as it did last year, and they still would like to contend. So I approach this from the perspective of, I actually think that it's either going to be the Nationals or the Mets. I think the Mets have a really good case. So let's look at some evidence. Okay. This is my reasons that I think the Mets could undertake on them. Reasons why the Mets will have more strikeouts. Because I was trying to figure out who's going to have more strikeouts the rest of the year. It's harder to figure out who's going to have fewer, because what we're talking about is teams that are good at not striking out. This is my evidence that I think the Mets may strike out more. Currently, Mark Canha, Starling Marte, Eduardo Escobar all have lower K rates, but are potentially in danger of losing their playing time to guys like Francisco Alvarez, Brett Baty, and Vientos, who all have higher K rates. But they're young, they're rookies. Maybe they'll get better at not striking out as time goes on. Okay, so that's one piece of evidence. Reasons why I think the Nationals might have more strikeouts over the rest of the year. The Nationals actually swing a lot. They swing the 6th most in baseball, just not leaving the strike zone out of it. They swing the 6th most. The Mets swing 3rd least. Even out of the zone, the Nats are swinging the 6th most. They're just really good at making contact on bad pitches. Literally, they're the best at it. And that's certainly helpful, but the Mets are also really good at making contact on bad pitches. They're the 4th best at making contact on bad pitches, but they add in a little bit of patience at the plate, not swinging at literally everything. And so, on the whole, my conclusion, Your Honor, is that the Nationals will not have the lowest strikeout rate at the end of the year, because I'm putting I'm willing to go out on a limb and say it's I'm not even just taking the field. I'm taking the Mets specifically.
Okay, you're taking the Mets specifically.
I think that the Mets will have the lowest strikeout rate at the end of the year.
If I have to predict that, I would pick the Guardians, because I think they can't help themselves. They will just get more contact hitters if they trade for hitters.
They should get some power.
I agree, but I think they will continue to do that.
Okay, so that was my first.
Okay, so my first thing is, so Eduardo Rodriguez, Detroit Tigers pitcher, has been an absolute god. So that is what we're deciding whether that's real or not. So last year, you may remember Eduardo Rodriguez had a really tough time. He missed time with injury, with a personal matter, just all around a rough season. And it was his first year on a multi-year contract with the Tigers. Just a kind of depressing time. So before that, he'd been a pretty steady, consistently good pitcher with the Boston Red Sox. So this year he comes out, and through 11 starts, he has a 2.13 ERA. And the Tigers, it's a bad division, so they're under 500. Maybe you're thinking they could trade him. A lot of people are thinking they could trade him. But I will say, they could also just win the division. That's not out of the realm of possibility if he were to continue pitching like one of the game's best pitchers. I am interested in whether you think he stays this good and what happens if he stays this good. Because the question of whether they trade him or whether they keep him has a lot of implications for the rest of the league also.
I think they trade him and he doesn't stay as good.
I kind of think that too. Yes.
Ooh,
so
okay.
if you look at his numbers, he's basically pitching by all of the, how much batters make contact against him, how hard they hit the ball against him. All of the expected StatCast metrics say he's pitching pretty much like he did in 2021 with Boston, when he was actually terribly unlucky. His overall numbers looked bad, even though he was pitching pretty well. Now he's in a much more favorable ballpark for pitchers, and he's getting pretty much the exact opposite luck. So I think he's a good pitcher, like a number 3 starter on a good team, number 2 starter on a wild card contender, maybe. So there could still be a lot of value in Eduardo Rodriguez pitching at normal levels of luck and cluster luck and ballpark and everything. But I do kind of think the Tigers will take the chance to continue their rebuild and not buy too hard into the temptation of chasing a bad division this year. So I think they'll move him, and I think it may wind up, we'll see how he pitches from now until July, but that could end up being a difficult assessment to make, because if you're trading for a guy with a 2.2 ERA, but you only expect him to pitch to a 3.4 ERA after that, that's a hard negotiation to make.
In terms of getting the deal that you want for him, you mean like from the Tigers' perspective?
I think in terms of the team trading for him's perspective, the Tigers have a ransom. They have a great pitcher, and we know how the trade deadline works. Lots of teams are going to need good pitching. And if Eduardo Rodriguez is the best pitcher on the market, which it certainly seems like he might be the pitcher with the best results this year on the market, then that is going to put some bidders for his services in an uncomfortable position.
Gotcha. And then he will potentially disappoint the fan base that he goes to, because why did you?
Yes, that part's a little unfair to him. He's doing great. He shouldn't be judged if his luck comes back to earth.
Okay, but you're saying that is big stamp sound thunk, not real?
I'm saying it's not real.
Okay, so we've both done our not reals, which has kind of spoiled what's coming. I did not think about that aspect. But the next phenomenon that we are going to investigate is no team is more than 5 games out of the NL postseason picture. So the worst team in the National League, which is currently the Washington Nationals, sad for them, and the St. Louis Cardinals, but the Nationals, are 5 games back of the last wild card spot. And to put that in perspective, you might be thinking, oh, well, you're just thinking about the Oakland A's. No, I'm not just thinking about the Oakland A's. The Oakland A's are 21 and a half games back, but there are 5 teams in the American League that are more games back of the wild card than the last place teams in the National League. The National League is a crowded field of mediocrity. They are not the best team, because they're not the Rays in baseball, and they're not the worst team, and everybody's just kind of hanging in the middle. I feel like a lot of attention has been paid, especially on our podcast, to how good the American League East is, and relatively speaking, how not good the American League Central is. And then the American League West actually has some meaningful division within it. But again, mostly that's the Oakland A's. On the flip side, everything in the National League is just kind of the same. Like, the Dodgers have a 600 winning percentage currently, 600 on the dot. Nobody else has above a 600 winning percentage, and nobody has below a 426 winning percentage. They are all just right in the middle. And okay, it is way too bold to say that literally the season will end with exactly the same separation that they happen to have on May 30th. Even if you were to extrapolate it out, took those exact winning percentages for the currently last wildcard team, which is the San Francisco Giants at 519. For the record, I didn't even say this yet because it doesn't even matter. The current NL wildcard teams are the Diamondbacks, the Marlins, and the Giants. That just doesn't even feel right. But again, why would it be? Because there are the Mets, Pirates, and Phillies all within 3 games of that. And then the entire rest of the NL, just 2 more games back. So, okay. if you were to extrapolate out the winning percentages, that would mean that they would end the season with a 15-game span. And that even seems too high, given what I'm saying. So, okay. For my real or not real, I am not necessarily saying like it'll be exactly 5 games. But I do kind of think that we are stuck with this level of
extreme parity.
Yeah, but in a bad sense, kind of. Actually, you know what? Let me not judge it. Let me just ask you, do you think this is good or bad, this extreme parity?
I don't think it's good. I don't know. I don't think it's good or bad. I think it's going to be... I disagree. I think it's going to be short-lived. I'll say that. So okay. I think it'll be short-lived. But I think the idea of these kind of close races and anything could happen is kind of fun. I think the bunchiness of this league has a chance to make the people who are really against the bigger playoff format angry again. This could really tee up
Those people are me.
Some anger about the larger playoff format. So one of my favorite things right now is to just find the favorite fun fact about the current standings to show how absurd it is. We are very close to the NL Central having the exact opposite standings from what the run differentials would indicate. So the St. Louis Cardinals, who are the last, they're dead last in the NL Central and tied for dead last in the National League. They have the best run differential in the NL Central, +6.
Yeah. I sent you just a screen grab of the run differential. So this is, if you take out the 3 division leaders, the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Milwaukee Brewers, currently the division leaders. So just reading down from best record, which is the Diamondbacks, to worst record, which is the Nationals, the run differentials in the NL go like this. +13, -41, +9, -13. Exactly 0. -38, -24, -5, -51, +5, +6, -26. That's a real roller coaster of run differentials. They should ostensibly be in order from biggest positive number to biggest negative number. They are not in any way, shape, or form. So, that was just another way of saying the thing that you just said, I realized.
Teams,
But that makes me think we are kind of going to, like, it feels like I don't think we are in any way going to finish with this exact same order of teams, but the sort of screwiness of their current hierarchy in relation to the run differential makes me think like they will switch places a whole bunch, but no one will pull away from the pack in a meaningful way. I also think that the expanded postseason killed the trade deadline, and I have absolutely no idea who is going to be a buyer and who is going to be a seller in the National League specifically, and that the end result of that is that no one will get meaningfully better or worse.
I think there will still be buyers and sellers, which is why I kind of think it will flip. And in particular, so run differential, it's not that every team, every league always finishes in order of the run differential. They very much do not. One of the biggest reasons that those things kind of get shifted from expectations is just bullpen performance, winning or losing 1-run games at a rate that goes against just logic. And the Miami Marlins are the best example of this right now. They've had a very good bullpen so far, and they are 2 games over 500 with a -41 run differential, which is worse than the Washington Nationals. So the tendency might be that the Marlins add at the deadline and try to kind of play with some house money. They're the Marlins, so I don't know that they're really going to do that. But the other thing about bullpen performance is it can go really fast in the opposite direction at any given moment. So I'm not saying I think the Marlins are going to be the team that drops out of the floor, but certainly the Colorado Rockies might drop through the floor, something like that.
I think they never trade anybody, so they're not going to be sellers.
Well, yeah, they'll just get worse because they're the Rockies. But one of these teams is going to drop down. The other fun fact about how crazy the NL is the Cincinnati Reds, whose team owner's son has spent multiple public luncheons talking about his team was out of it before the season started, has the same record as the San Diego Padres, who spent bukus of dollars to make their team the best. That's the current state of the National League. And I don't think it's going to remain even within an expanded realm. I think things are going to sort themselves out a lot.
I don't really know why I don't know why I'm defending the position of like this extreme bizarre situation where they're all huddled around the midpoint is going to maintain, but I kind of think it is. So that's my, what's the, like a loud stamp sound, like cha-chunk, real.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm envisioning? I'm envisioning like
a public notary.
Yeah. Like I feel like that graphic and it's like in red, but okay. It's going to say real. All right.
Okay.
You go.
Visual medium. Okay, the last phenomena that we're going to discuss today is the Rangers dethroning the Astros in the AL West. So obviously they haven't dethroned anyone yet. It's May 30th, but they are leading the AL West by 3 games. The Astros have just run roughshod over this division pretty much since the A's were contending with them going back and forth a few years ago, but mostly since the Astros got good after their rebuild in 2017, they have run this division. And I believe, the question is, are the Rangers going to topple them and take this division? And I am ready to say, sure, yes, I think it's real that the Rangers are, let's go ahead and say it. I think the Rangers will win the division. I'm ready to go there. And I will ask what you think, but I will say that I wrote about it at Yahoo Sports last week. This is the reasoning behind it is, in addition to the money they've spent on the pitching and on Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, the thing that has changed my mind about the Rangers is how much they're getting out of their younger, earlier career hitters. From Adolis Garcia to Josh Young to Jonah Heim. Nathaniel Lowe broke out last year, but has really continued his performance this year. Ezekiel Duran filled in for Corey Seager for a while and just hit the daylights out of the ball. And now they're like, okay, well, we got to find somewhere to put him. So the Rangers' development on the hitting side makes me believe they actually do have enough depth to not maybe sustain a .642 winning percentage, which is what they have right now, but to really contend and win this division.
I think it is always wrong to bet against the Astros. I was just like looking at the Astros being like, wow, really impressive that the Astros have the 3rd best starting pitcher ERA, considering they lost the Cy Young Award winner. And then I went over to the Rangers. It turns out they have the 2nd best starting pitcher ERA. So that does not help my case. However, I'm seeing that the Rangers have the 26th best relief pitcher ERA. So that's not good. I don't know. I think the Astros were playing without Jose Altuve for a long time, and now he's back. He's hitting grand slams. Jordan Alvarez is like the best power hitter in the game. Their pitching is pretty good, despite losing Justin Verlander and Jose Urquidy, I believe. And
Luis Garcia is out.
And Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers hasn't come back yet. Where are they making these pitchers? I don't know. The Astros are always good.
They are. I don't think they're going to be bad.
You just think that Rangers are going to be better.
I think the Rangers can hold on. Yeah.
I've never been to that ballpark. I don't really want to go.
Well, that's a you problem, I think, but you might be going to that ballpark. No, obviously the Rangers are not going to continue getting exactly this level of stardom from Nathan Eovaldi, who seems to pitch a complete game shutout every time he starts, which is not sustainable. But I think there's enough there. The Astros have not necessarily hit big on their offseason decisions. Jose Abreu looks cooked.
That's true.
The center field platoon idea they set up is not going amazingly well for them. Alex Bregman looks a little off from his earlier career. So Jeremy Pena, I will say, Jeremy Pena, I'm sorry to Jeremy Pena. He seems like a very nice guy, and he was a really fun postseason story. But I think the postseason made us believe he had leveled up and was going to be like, a Dansby Swanson level, like power and defense shortstop. He's not doing that. He is just not a very good hitter. He's still a good defender, but he has not been a good hitter. And when you start chipping away at the lineup in that many places, you end up with a team with Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve, which is like going to make the playoffs for sure, but maybe not one that has as deep a lineup as the Rangers.
This is I should not be asking you this as a professional baseball writer, but what's happening with Jacob deGrom?
I think he's just slowly working his way back from whatever injury scare. They're going to be conservative and hope to get as much as they can out of him. But I think he has started throwing, but is not ready to come back yet.
Because according to Roster Resource, he was put on the 15-day IL in April with elbow inflammation.
Yes.
So I don't know if that will make them better or worse. I hope it makes him better. Didn't I say that I thought Jacob deGrom was going to make like 30 starts and be great?
Yes, you did do that. Yeah.
That's not going to happen. No. Fine. Okay. I liked the Rangers in the offseason, not for the reasons that have turned out to be why the Rangers are good. And so I'm happy with this pick. I think this was a good segment despite my reservations.
Boom.
Remember
that for next Memorial Day.
All right. I am going to bandwagon something now. And this is a not backstory. So I decided what I was going to bandwagon just looking at some stats page. I was for the aforementioned segment in which we responded to the stats thus far. I was like scrolling every possible website that has stats on it and came across one that seemed interesting to me and then just spent way too much time like rearranging the chart. After I did that and decided what I wanted to talk about, I saw a cute little story about, did you see the umpire hot mic?
I didn't see the umpire hot mic, no.
Okay. The Marlins challenged an out at home in the 10th inning. So like it was called out and they said that the catcher hadn't touched on plate. And since it's an important run in the 10th inning, probably playing a close game if you're there, they were like, we're going to challenge that. And crew chief Jeff Nelson said, they got their heads up their asses, just like straight into the mic while it was still turned on. Like he was like, the Marlins are challenging the call at first. They got their heads up their asses, and it like did this. It like through the same PA system through which he announced that they were challenging it. And joke's on you, crew chief Jeff Nelson, because it was overturned, and then they went on to win the game in 10 innings. So that run and that not end of the inning, pretty crucial. So that is the umpire hot mic notwithstanding, is an excellent example of the thing that I am going to bandwagon, which is that managers should be challenging so much more. So much more. I am just going to tell you. So what happened was I happened upon the Baseball Reference 2023 Major League Baseball Managers stats page and just started like playing around with the number of challenges, the overturned rates, the overturned success rate. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, who has like the best overturned success rate? And I was like, that's very interesting. The best overturned success rate is Skip Schumacher. First of all, shouldn't be doubting him. But then I was thinking about the fact that doesn't matter nearly as much as the sheer number of overturns that you get, which it goes Bud Black at 11 and then Kevin Cash at 10 and Gabe Kapler at 9 are our top three. Actually, yeah. Kevin Cash is a really good manager. I was just saying. The Rays. And I was like, that's it? Those are the number of times that Bud Black has challenged, he has the most. So he has a 52.4% success rate. You're like, oh, it's only like 50% of the time. He's challenged 21 times. 11 of those have been overturned. They've played 54 games. You could have been challenging in every one of those games. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't get overturned. It's like mound visits. Have you noticed this? Their teams are not using all of their mound visits because they are like afraid to be out of mound visits.
It's using the backup catcher problem. Teams don't want to be out.
And I was just thinking about it. I was like, do you know, I'm sorry to the Mets. We're going to do a kind of a mean thing right now. Buck Showalter is really bad at this. I know they were really good last year. They had their guy. This year, Buck Showalter batting 100. It's 10%. He has a 10% success rate. He has challenged 10 times and gotten one right. Probably because they don't have as much time. This is the whole thing. Going into the season, they're going to have less time. Part of the pitch clock, you're not going to have as much time. That's probably making managers who used to feel very comfortable because of their guy in the video room who was checking these things less likely to want to challenge. It seems like Buck Showalter is not challenging things this year. He's only challenged 10 times in 54 games. it doesn't matter if you're wrong. They don't penalize you other than to lose your challenge. They don't you don't get it out. There's nothing you gotta be challenging more. Like, if honestly, I was looking at this and it has radicalized me. Like, I was mad. I was mad at these managers who aren't challenging more. Do you know who's also only challenged 10 times and gotten one right? Bob Melvin of the San Diego Padres. The Mets and the Padres are two teams who should be throwing everything they have at efforts to get wins. And I know that, whatever, one challenge, successful or not, is only going to have so much of an effect. But you're doing something wrong. If you're Bob Melvin and Buck Showalter and you've only had one successful challenge in a disappointing season, you are not using your challenges liberally enough, because you should be doing what you can as a manager to help your team.
Much like Steve Cohen and Peter Seidler's money, you can't take these with you.
Yes. Use your challenges, people. That is has this been a compelling argument? I might write about this.
I think you're right about this. This was a big sabermetric talking point early on when the challenge system came out. Was the smart teams used more challenges because it just makes more. You shouldn't worry about the success rate on challenges, really. You should
not
just worry about the value of getting things overturned in your favor. And I think under the old system, teams had kind of gotten to where it was about right. They were challenging plenty and they had the video guy. The time crunch has made managers, I think, worse at this because it goes more to their gut instinct, and their gut instinct is to only do it if they think they're going to be right. And actually, I think they benefited from the replay room saying, hey, I don't know if I'm right, but this is over the threshold. You should do it. And I think a lot of managers have not internalized that calculus yet.
It is very interesting to me that the teams with the lowest success rate also don't challenge that much. Specifically, I'm talking about Bob Melvin and Buck Showalter with their one successful challenge each and their 10% success rate. They feel like they are being judicious and not challenging a lot, but they're also not accurate a lot. So why
Just
are
do
you
more.
bothering being judicious? This is my bandwagon. I'm bandwagoning managers challenging more. And I said this and I was like, wow, what a really compelling argument by me. And then Jake, my husband, was like, okay, but do you really want to see more challenges, or would that just slow the game down? And I was like, you know what? Shut up. That's not, I understand that from a viewer perspective. I don't know that more manager challenges would actually make the game more enjoyable, but it does feel like a real, strategic lane left wide open. Even Bud Black, with his 11 successful challenges, is only challenging in fewer than half of his games. Come on, there's got to be at least one close call in every game. Just use your challenges. And do not let crew chief Jeff Nelson saying they got their heads up their asses make you think that you should not be using your challenges, because sometimes crew chief Jeff Nelson says that and he is wrong and you go on to win the game. That's my bandwagon.
Good bandwagon.
Oh, thank you. And that is all we have got for you this week. Make sure that you catch everything we are writing. Maybe I'll write about this by following us both on Twitter. I am at Hannah R. Keyser. He is at Z Crizer. And if you've made it this far, you should definitely subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel, where you can see Zach's oyster sweatshirt. You actually can't. Could you show everyone your oyster sweatshirt so they could see it?
The microphone is a little, yeah.
And then leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.